gospel, if you haven't read it yet, you'll know what I mean when you run across it on Sunday. I wasn't looking forward to this video. It's the gospel of division, of Jesus coming to set a fire to the earth, his baptism of fire. Like it's this heavy language of division, of father against son and houses divided, like all of this kind of rough language. And my first thought was, this is like the last thing that we need to be thinking about in our world, in our climate today. In a climate where politics becomes war, and it takes over everything. It takes over family, it takes over church. In an era where opinions fly with the power of truth, where truth becomes narrative, where narrative is defended even violently. This wasn't the message I wanted to preach about. Now, I think you and I both know that that's not the message that Jesus is offering. It's not permission to continue to be spiteful and mean and to close our hearts and our minds to our brothers and sisters. I'm pretty sure that that is not Jesus' message here. But he does talk about division, and he does talk about a baptism of fire. And most of the commentators would be discussing this in terms of truth. And that would be truth with a capital T, not with a capital O for my opinion. Right? This isn't the various little truths that we cling onto and fight about. This is truth, which is one of God's names. It would be a perfectly valid way to look at today's scriptures from the perspective of the demands of truth when I understand it, and how that understanding can in fact lead to struggle and division. And to remember that the fire and the division ultimately that Jesus is talking about is not World War III, it's his own crucifixion. It's his own crucifixion and our participation in that suffering as an act of love. And so I thought, what if we, just following the course we've been on now for a while, what if we looked at this from the perspective not of truth, but of love? Like, in God, truth and love become the same thing. But in our world, like, they're different concepts, and maybe another perspective could be helpful. Because love also places demands on us. And when we've come to love someone, we're ready to risk our lives. We're ready to risk other relationships. We're ready to break and destroy not one another, but our own peace and structure for the sake of another. Like, love also causes division, not just Romeo and Juliet, but the love of a mother for her child that requires her to protect and defend her child at all cost and at all personal cost. And from that perspective, Jesus' baptism of fire wasn't so much a baptism of truth, but a baptism of love. That his love for the Father that consumed him, became him, I guess God doesn't become, I'm sorry, but that love that is him. And the love that he had for us poured out freely upon us, ultimately poured out freely upon us as fire, as tongues of fire, but also as blood dripping from his side. That's the kind of division, the kind of struggle, and maybe it'll hit our families, and maybe it will hit our perspectives in our lives, but not from a cold and outside place, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of love. Because we see that in Jesus. And the division that was caused, yes, there was a lot of division around Jesus, but what he did was embrace it all in himself, in love. And where truth and love meet, that's where we find God. And so there will be things that our minds come to know in a way that requires us to live our lives. And there will be ways that love requires us to live our lives, and to find that place where pain and suffering, a baptism of fire and division our love, and our truth. I think maybe there's room in today's gospel not to blow up our families or our world, but to absorb some of the struggle and pain of our families and our world, as Jesus did in the great baptism, in the midst of division and struggle, the love with which he embraced his Christ.